All right, we're diving into some pretty dense stuff today, but it's important stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking Chinese manufacturing contracts.
Absolutely.
We've got a great source here, avoiding common contract mistakes in China.
It's a good one.
And this is kind of if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I'm never going to manufacture in China. Well, maybe you will someday.
Right.
But this is all about protecting your ideas. And so, we could be talking about, $1 million idea.
Absolutely.
That you need to protect.
Yeah, you don't want to give it away.
You don't want to give it away.
No.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is this thing called a China Product Development Agreement, or PDA.
Okay.
Just the name alone sounds pretty dry.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about this, and what the source really emphasizes, is having crystal clear language about intellectual property rights.
Yeah, and that's especially important in China.
So why is that?
Well, IP theft is a real risk over there.
Okay.
And it's not that we're assuming everyone's out to get you,
Yeah.
but you have to be proactive.
Okay.
It's like, think of it like a prenup for your brilliant idea.
Okay.
You're just making sure everything's fair and square from the beginning.
Right. And hopefully, our business ventures last a little longer than most of those celebrity marriages.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so PDA, prenup for your business idea.
Exactly.
All right, so what's next?
Okay, so after you've got that PDA in place, you're going to want to think about an NNN agreement.
Okay, now this sounds even more confusing.
It sounds a little intimidating.
I know. What is it?
So it stands for non-disclosure, non-use, and non-circumvention.
Okay.
And you might be thinking, well, isn't that just a fancy NDA?
Right.
But there are some key differences, especially when we're talking about China.
Uh-huh.
A standard NDA, that's like putting a basic lock on your door. It might deter some casual theft, but, someone who really wants to get in, they're going to find a way.
Right.
An NNN agreement, that's like having a state-of-the-art security system, motion detectors, cameras, the whole 9 yards.
Got it. So I need more than just a basic lock.
Exactly, especially in China.
All right, so break it down for me. What are these 3 aspects of an NNN agreement?
Sure. So first you have the non-disclosure. That's your standard secrecy clause.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
Okay, like a regular NDA?
Right. But then we add non-use, which means they can't use your intellectual property for their own gain.
Okay.
And finally, non-circumvention, which prevents them from going behind your back and dealing directly with your customers or suppliers.
Oh, so they can't just slightly tweak my design and then sell it as their own.
Exactly. And that's where those additional layers, the non-use and non-circumvention, become really crucial.
Okay.
Let's say you've designed a revolutionary new drone.
Okay.
A simple NDA might only prevent them from blatantly copying your design.
Mm-hmm.
But with an NNN, you're protected even if they try to use your core technology or design elements in a different product, or if they try to cut you out of the supply chain.
Wow, so it's like a legal force field around your whole business model.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
It's all about creating a framework of trust, but also making sure you have legal recourse if that trust is broken.
Right. So we've talked about protecting your ideas during development with the PDA and then sort of shielding them with this NNN agreement.
Right.
So where do we go from there? What's the next step in this whole process?
Well, now we're getting into the actual production phase, and that's where the manufacturing agreement, or MA, comes in.
Okay, so if the PDA is registering the blueprints and the NNN is securing the building site, the MA is the actual construction plan.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Okay.
The MA is where you get down to the nitty-gritty of production, making sure everyone's on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about specifying materials, production timelines, quality control procedures, you name it.
So everything.
It's like a recipe, where you list out every ingredient, every measurement, every step, leaving absolutely no room for interpretation.
Right, because as they say, the devil's in the details.
Exactly.
And speaking of details, the source really hammered home the importance of clear quality control guidelines in the MA.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk a bit more about that?
Sure. So you need to think about things like, what's an acceptable defect rate? What percentage of faulty products are you willing to tolerate?
Mm-hmm.
What are the specific criteria for a product to be considered defective? And who's doing these quality checks? Is it the manufacturer themselves, or do you want a third-party inspector to make sure it's all above board?
Right, because finding out that an entire shipment is unusable after it's already arrived, that would be a nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. And without those clear guidelines in your contract, you might not have much recourse.
Right. And I think the source even mentioned an example of a
Yeah.
company that ended up with a huge shipment of faulty products.
Sorry.
And because the contract terms were so vague, they couldn't really do anything about it.
Exactly. That's why being meticulous with that MA is so important.
So don't just assume things will work themselves out.
No, spill it all out, dot every I, cross every T.
Okay. So we've got clear quality control procedures.
Right.
What other potential pitfalls do we need to be aware of when we're talking about this MA?
Well, let's talk about payment terms.
Okay.
When and how will you pay the manufacturer? What happens if there are delays? Are there penalties for late payments? And then what about any intellectual property that might be developed during the manufacturing process?
Okay.
Who owns any improvements or innovations that come up?
Wow, this is starting to feel like a minefield.
It can be complex, but with careful planning and the right legal guidance, it's totally manageable.
Okay.
And remember, a comprehensive MA, that's your best protection against those potential mines.
So we've drafted our PDA. We've got our NNN agreement.
Yep.
We've got our MA.
You got to
Everything is crystal clear. Are we fully protected at this point?
almost. There's one more crucial piece of the puzzle,
Okay.
and that's localization and enforceability.
Okay.
Even the best contract in the world is useless if it doesn't hold up in a Chinese court.
Right. You can't just take any old contract and assume it'll work in a completely different legal system.
Exactly. And that's why the source really stresses the need for bilingual contracts that comply with Chinese law.
Okay.
Think of it like this. You wouldn't travel to a foreign country without a phrase book or a local guide, right?
So a bilingual contract is like my phrase book, and a legal expert who understands Chinese law is like my local guide.
Exactly. They can help you translate not just the language, but the legal concepts too,
Okay.
making sure your agreement will actually hold up in a Chinese court.
So getting that expert legal advice is non-negotiable.
It's an investment that can save you a lot of headaches down the line.
I'm realizing that this whole thing is kind of like navigating a new city. You need a good map, a phrase book, and a local guide who knows all the ins and outs.
That's a great way to put it. And just like with traveling, preparation is key.
Okay, so we've got our PDAs, NNNs, and MAs all buttoned up.
Mhm.
We've made sure they're localized and enforceable under Chinese law.
Right.
What else do we need to consider?
Well, even with the most airtight agreements, disagreements can still happen.
Right.
So you need to have a plan for that.
So it's not just about preventing problems, but also about knowing what to do when they come up.
Exactly. And that's where those termination and dispute resolution clauses come in. You're basically building a safety net into your contract.
Okay.
You're anticipating those potential issues
Right.
and establishing a clear process for handling them fairly and efficiently.
So walk me through it.
Okay.
What should these termination and dispute resolution clauses actually cover?
Well, they should outline the conditions under which either party can terminate the contract.
Okay.
For instance, what happens if there's a breach of contract? What are the required notice periods? Are there penalties involved?
Okay.
And really important, what are the responsibilities of each party once the contract is terminated?
So it's like you're creating a clear exit strategy
Yeah.
just in case things go south.
Exactly.
But what if a dispute comes up that you can't resolve just through those termination clauses?
Right. Well, that's where a solid dispute resolution mechanism comes in.
Okay.
The source material really recommends choosing a method that's enforceable in China,
Mm-hmm.
and they highlight arbitration as a preferred option.
Okay. Can you unpack that a bit for me?
Sure.
Why is arbitration often favored in these situations?
Well, imagine you're caught in a legal dispute in a foreign country.
Okay.
You're facing a complex legal system, language barriers,
Yeah.
potentially biased local courts.
Right.
It can be incredibly daunting and expensive.
That sounds really stressful.
Oh, it definitely can be.
Yeah.
Arbitration offers a more streamlined and neutral approach. Instead of going through a lengthy court process, you have a neutral third party, an arbitrator,
Okay.
who makes a binding decision based on the evidence presented.
Hmm.
And this arbitrator is often an expert in international business law
Okay.
and familiar with those nuances of the Chinese legal system.
So it's like having a seasoned referee
Yeah,
who understands both sides of the game
exactly.
and can make a fair call.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And arbitration is often faster and less expensive than traditional litigation,
Okay.
which is a huge plus for businesses.
So having that clear dispute resolution mechanism in place, and especially one that favors arbitration,
Right.
that seems like it's a must-have in any Chinese manufacturing contract.
I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
It's all about protecting your interests
Yeah.
and ensuring a fair and efficient process
Okay.
if any disagreements come up.
It seems like navigating this world of Chinese manufacturing contracts is all about thinking several steps ahead,
Yeah.
anticipating those potential issues, and having a clear procedures in place to address them.
Absolutely. It's not just about signing on the dotted line.
Right.
It's about strategically building a framework for a successful and secure partnership.
Well, I think after diving deep into all of this, I'd say it's clear that understanding these essential agreements is like having an insurance policy for your business in China.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
It's about protecting your investment, your intellectual property,
Right.
and ultimately your peace of mind.
Okay.
You're taking those proactive steps to mitigate risks and ensure a smoother manufacturing experience.
So for our listener who is embarking on this journey, what's the most crucial piece of advice you can give them? What's that key takeaway they should really hold on to?
Before signing any contract, take a moment, step back,
Okay.
and imagine yourself in a worst-case scenario.
Okay.
Ask yourself, would this agreement protect me?
Mm-hmm.
Would it provide a clear path forward if things go wrong?
Right.
If the answer is no, go back to the drawing board. Make sure you're fully covered.
That's such valuable advice.
Yeah.
It's not about being pessimistic. It's about being prepared.
Exactly.
And ensuring that your interests are protected.
Exactly. Hope for the best,
Right.
but prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
And when it comes to manufacturing in China,
Mm-hmm.
that preparation starts with airtight contracts
Okay.
that cover every angle.
And if all else fails, remember what they say?
Oh.
A verbal contract isn't worth the paper it's written on.
Especially when you're dealing with international manufacturing.
Right.
It
Exactly.
really underscores the importance of having everything clearly documented, legally binding,
Mm-hmm.
leaving no room for misinterpretations or misunderstandings.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
I think so too.
We've gone from those intricacies of the China Product Development Agreement
Right.
to the crucial safeguards of NNN agreements.
Yeah.
We even explored that detailed world of manufacturing agreements.
And we've highlighted the importance of localization, enforceability,
Right.
and having those robust dispute resolution mechanisms in place.
Mm-hmm.
These elements are all interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
They form a comprehensive strategy
Okay.
for protecting your interests in that complex world of Chinese manufacturing.
It's been quite a journey.
It has.
We've unpacked a lot of information,
Yeah,
but I hope our listener feels empowered to navigate this landscape with confidence,
I hope so.
knowing they have the tools and the knowledge to succeed.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power.
Yes.
And the more you understand about these Chinese manufacturing contracts,
Right.
the better equipped you'll be to protect your interests and achieve your business goals.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive,
Well, yeah.
but I'm sure this is just the beginning of our listeners' exciting journey into the world of manufacturing in China.
Absolutely.
Until next time,
Happy manufacturing.
happy manufacturing. You know, it strikes me that all these agreements,
Yeah.
it's not just about the legalities.
Right.
It's really about building that foundation for a solid partnership.
Absolutely. I mean, these agreements kind of force you to think through every single aspect of your relationship with your manufacturing partner.
Okay.
You're not just, tossing a design over and hoping for the best, right?
Right.
You're having those conversations, those in-depth conversations about expectations, responsibilities, potential challenges,
Right.
and that communication, that transparency,
Yeah.
that can be so valuable.
It's like that pregame huddle,
Yeah.
where everybody gets on the same page before the game even starts.
Exactly. And that alignment from the get-go can save you so many headaches down the road.
Right. Right.
It fosters that trust, clarifies those goals,
Okay.
and establishes that framework for problem solving together.
We've talked a lot about the kind of technicalities
Yeah,
of these agreements, but what
Yeah.
about the human element?
Yeah.
What are some practical tips for building strong relationships with these Chinese manufacturers?
That's a great question. And, in China, relationships are everything.
Okay.
So building those personal connections, fostering trust, understanding those cultural nuances, that can go a long way.
Okay.
Take the time, visit your manufacturing partner in person,
Okay.
get to know their team, show genuine interest in their business. A little bit of effort in those personal relationships can pay off big time in the long run.
So it's not just about transactions.
Right.
It's really about building those partnerships.
Exactly. And don't underestimate clear communication.
Yeah.
Remember, things can get lost in translation.
Right. Right.
Be explicit, be patient, don't be afraid to ask questions.
So to sum up, if I'm hearing you correctly,
Yeah.
It's this combination of meticulous legal prep
Hmm.
and then this thoughtful relationship building.
Yeah, you got it.
That's really the key to making this whole thing work.
It's about protecting your interests with those ironclad agreements,
Mhm.
but also nurturing those relationships
Oh,
with understanding and respect.
that's great.
It's a powerful blend
Yeah.
that can lead to a truly win-win partnership.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
We have.
We've explored this intricate world
We-
of Chinese manufacturing contracts,
Have been.
unpacked their importance,
Mhm.
and I hope that it empowered our listener to navigate this whole landscape with confidence.
I hope so too. It's been a pleasure
Yes.
joining you on this journey.
Likewise.
And remember, knowledge is power.
Yes.
By understanding the ins and outs of these agreements, you're taking a huge step towards achieving those manufacturing goals in China.
Absolutely. To our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
Remember, manufacturing in China can be an incredibly rewarding experience,
It can.
but it requires, careful planning, attention to detail,
Absolutely.
and a commitment to building those strong partnerships.
Couldn't agree more.
With the right approach and the knowledge you've gained today,
Yeah,
we're confident you can make it a success.
absolutely.
Until next time,
Happy manufacturing.
happy manufacturing.
Yeah.